What does it mean to be a survivor? What does it mean to rise above your adversities? What does it mean to be the individual who says, I'm going to keep fighting? We're going to have Kina Hutchins Clements, my next guest, share that information with us. She is a personal trainer, she is a mom, and she's a life coach. But most importantly, Kina Hutchins Clements is a survivor. Welcome to Surviving Change, Kina Hutchins Clements.
Hello, everyone.
And I'm glad I don't have to say your whole name all through this because I know you as Kina,
Yes.
my former cheerleader. So it's just
Yes.
awesome to have you here as a full-grown woman,
I know.
and not the pretend woman that, you all wanted to be when I was coaching you as cheerleaders years ago. But if you just give us a little background information about yourself, I'm sure the Surviving Change audience would just love to hear a little bit about you.
Well, I guess where my story starts off at, I was a mom of 2 little boys, and I guess I was trying to start losing weight because I was out of breath trying to run behind a 2-year-old, and I had a 6-month-old baby.
Wow.
So at that point, my only mission was to lose weight. So I went to the doctor, got my numbers, got where I was supposed to be at, and the doctor told me, he said, look, you're just a mile away from having a stroke. Your cholesterol is extremely too high. And I noticed I had been having headaches every day, and I didn't know what they were about. So he was like, and your blood pressure is borderline. And I had gestational diabetes. And I was at the time, I slightly was still on the cusp of actually having diabetes. You can continue to have it after you have your child. And he was like, you are too heavy for your height. We need to make some changes. And I think I started crying in his office. And I went home. And I think I stayed in my pajamas maybe 2 weeks because I was just so depressed.
Wow.
For 2 weeks, I called on to everybody that I knew that is a personal trainer, people that I knew that lost weight, and nobody had answers for me. Nobody could help me, or they wanted to charge me a ridiculous price. And as a mom of 2 kids staying at home, I didn't have that money. So I think I went to bed that night, and it was Sunday morning, and I woke up. I was getting up early to go to church, but I just snapped up. God said, get up. And I'm like, get up? What do you mean get up? He said, I have something bigger for you to do. And I don't even think I had washed my face or brushed my teeth. I just jumped up, took all those clothes off of my treadmill, and got up and started walking. And I started walking very slow. And at that point, I still was like, God, what are you calling me to do? Like, what are you wanting me to do? He's like, I have something bigger for you to do. And so I think I started walking, and I probably lost like 50 pounds. I don't even know how I lost 50 pounds. I don't even know how I came to that point. But then my clothes started feeling looser, so I said, let me continue going. By the time I think I was done, I was 245 pounds. I think by the time I was done, I was 120 pounds.
And about how long did that take?
That took me about a year and a half.
Okay.
A good year and a half. And I had a small child at the time. He was 6 months, and he had started learning how to crawl, and he can crawl really fast. So I'd be on the treadmill, and I'd try to set him up with a pallet. And I would jump off the treadmill and quickly run back because he would be crawling to me, trying to get to me. And I would quickly jump off, run back, put him in his spot, and get back on the treadmill. And it just was like, God, how am I putting this together with 2 small kids? I don't know how, but he was like, continue to follow me. And I think at 120 pounds, it was around February 2012 when my teammate passed away, Tara Bell. And at that time, it was heartbreaking for me because I have not known anybody my age to pass away at such a young age. And I think after Tara's funeral, I came home and I laid on the bed and I was just devastated. I knew she had a small daughter and I had a small child as well, 2 small kids. And I was just laying on the bed and I was like, God, why would you allow this to happen to Tara, of all people? She was just starting her life. She just got married. I was just confused. And instantly the light in my room popped on. And I thought to myself, like, that is kind of creepy that the light in my room popped on. But something told me, it said, you're next. And I said, next? And then I just kind of went to the bathroom, and then maybe going on 7 months later, I found out that I had a collapsed lung. So I had found out I had a collapsed lung. Previously, maybe 2 months prior, well, maybe a year prior to that, I had like some asthma type symptoms. And I went to the doctor and they said, everything is fine. I just see a gray space there. I really didn't question it. I didn't really say, well, you know, what is this gray space? I just kind of went home. I said, I feel better. You give me a breathing treatment. I feel better. But I think Tara died February 2012, and I got sick September 17, 2012. And at that point, I had to go to work. I was working. I started working at the boys' school. My son just turned 3, and he was in pre-K. So I started working at their school at Chapel Hill Christian School. And at the time, I think I took a trip. It was the weekend. I took a trip to the mountains. And I was feeling kind of funny while I was up there. My head was kind of hurting. I said, well, maybe I'm going to have a stroke. I don't know what it is. And I just kept getting this feeling like I couldn't digest my food well. And I think it came to Sunday. I came back to pick up my sons from my mom, and she looked at me and she said, you don't look normal. Something is wrong with my child. A mother knows something is wrong with their child. So I was like, no, I'm okay. I'm just a little tired. And I took the boys, went home, and my voice started skipping in and out. I was talking maybe like this, up, up, up. And my neighbors was having like a Super Bowl type, not Super Bowl, but like a football party, I think, at the time. And I went over to the house and she was like, you're not sounding right. Are you okay? And I said, I don't. I was just, my voice was just skipping in and out. And it got to be maybe like 9 o'clock at night when we got back home. I said, I'm gonna call my supervisor. I couldn't reach her. So I called one of my coworkers, and she said, you don't sound right. Like, this don't sound like the normal Kina. So finally my supervisor called me, and she said, no, just go ahead and go to the doctor tomorrow and don't worry about coming in. But being the little dedicated teacher I was like, no, I'll come in after my appointment. And after my appointment, my doctor was listening to me, and he kind of had this face, and this has been my doctor all the way through the weight loss and everything. So he kind of knows his patient, and he just kind of started staring at me. And I was like, what's wrong? And he was like, I want you to go to have a CT scan in 2 hours. And I said, okay. He was like, I'm giving you a breathing treatment. Your voice is still skipping in and out. So I went home. I took a nap. At my appointment, I went to my CT scan appointment, got there, and they took all the tests. And previous to that, years before, I was an EMT student. So I kind of started noticing something while I was in the test. I seen 2 people in the room while I was testing in the window. And then I started seeing 6 people in the room. And in my mind, I was like, uh-oh, this is not good. This is not good. So I got ready to come out of the test, and the nurse said, you have to stay on campus 45 minutes. You can't leave. So I think I got ready to go downstairs to go to Chick-fil-A, put my jacket on. And she said, wait a minute, you can't leave. Ms. Clements, you can't leave. And I said, why? She was like, your whole lung had collapsed. We don't even see it on film. She was like, we're going to have to rush you over and do immediate surgery on you to bring your lung back up. And at that point, I just started panicking. I think anxiety started setting in because, for one, my sons were at school. And I was like, who's going to get them out of school? Who's going to pick them up? And she was like, well, you can't worry about that right now. We got to go over and we're going to do this surgery. So when I got in the room, I met my nurse. 2 doctors walked in. They were talking on a tape recorder. They said, we have a 30-year-old female. I had just turned 30 a month prior to that. We have a 30-year-old female that is a runner, and her lung has collapsed. And she was in the mountains this weekend. And then he stopped the tape recorder and he said, I don't understand why you are not passed out. A lot of people that we see with their lung collapse, either they pass out, and especially at the high altitude you were in the mountains, you should have instantly passed out. And so I was still trying to process what he was saying to me. He was like, do you not understand that you're a miracle right now? Because you could have died and we wouldn't have found out what happened to you until we got to autopsy. And at that point, I still was numb to what was going on. So I got over into the room, and this was a first for them in the hospital that I went to. They're not used to dealing with traumas. So I think I had over 15 medical people in the room. I had 2 students in the room. And I actually had one of my EMT friends that I went to school with. He was in the room as well. And they said, we're going to do this immediate surgery on you. We're going to inflate your lung back. So they inflated the lung back. And at first he said, well, I'm going to tell everybody in the room to brace yourself, because once I inflate the lung, it's going to be painful. So my nurse at the time had never seen anything like that before. I think this was her first time, well, her second day on the job or something. And immediately when he inflated the lung back, I kind of sat up and took a deep breath in and like fell back down. And for me, it was worse than childbirth. It was worse than childbirth. When they inflate the lung, they actually inserted a tube about this big into my side where they inflated the lung at. They numbed the space, they put the tube in, and they start draining the fluid. And they said the reason why I was looking so pale and I had dark circles under my eyes, because the fluid that was building up in the cavity, it was pushing my heart over. So it was causing my heart to not give me enough oxygen. So at that time, I think he said, well, you're going to have to stay in the hospital maybe about a week. And I said, a week? Like, I got 2 kids at home a week. Who's going to keep them for a week? Who's going to take them to school? And he was like, well, that's life right now. You're going to have to slow down. And at that time, I was personal training. I was working at the school. I was doing a lot of things. And I think that was God's way of just sitting me down. Look, you got to sit down. You have to take time for yourself. Being a mom, you don't never have time for yourself. Then I'm working at the school where I'm a mom to 24 other kids. So I'm mothering all day long. So I never really took the time out for myself. And that was my way of sitting down for a week. And after that week, I got a little better. They allowed me to go home. Then I went home for some time, and I think I took 4 weeks off from work. And I went back to work, and I got ready to put the crayons up in the cabinet. I worked with another teacher. and I dropped the crayons. They fell all over the floor. And my right arm, where they inserted the tube in, started shaking. And she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I don't know what's going on right now. I don't know what's happening." So I think that evening after work, I went back to the doctor. And she said, "Well, your lung sounds a little weak, but nothing to really be concerned with." So I think I went to Friday at the school, and I ate pizza, came home, and I was laying down on the sofa, but I still just wasn't feeling all like myself at that point. And I think I went to bed. I had already put the boys into bed. I went to bed at 3 a.m. and because I was still uncomfortable with falling asleep. So at 3 a.m., I think I fell asleep for maybe 30 minutes. And I woke up and it felt like my heart was like pounding out of my chest. Pounding out of my chest. And I was thinking I was gonna die. I didn't know what was going on with me. So at the time, we had to wake up the boys. We had to get them ready so we could leave. And I was being rushed to the hospital. And I'm thinking to myself this whole entire time while my boys are in the back seat, don't die.
Yeah.
Don't die in this car on your boys. Try to stay awake, try to stay alert. And I was trying my best not to pass out. And they were looking at me in the back seat with these two big eyes, like, "Mommy, what's wrong? Why are we up so late at night?" And I couldn't talk to them because it was just like I didn't have enough oxygen, enough air. So finally I got to the hospital and I couldn't say but 2 words. And the lady at the front desk, she remembered me from last time. She said, "Don't say anything else. We're going to go get you a wheelchair." So they went and got me a wheelchair. And when I got in the room, my heart rate started going crazy. It started going up really high. And I started feeling like I was going to pass out, and I started seeing the nurses come in. And it was like I was up, but I was not fully alert.
Okay.
And it was like I was in a daydream space. And I could see them rolling the paddles in the room. And I could see my kids standing in the corner. And I think my oldest son had a tear just running down his eyes. And he was like, "What's happening to my mommy? Is my mommy gonna die?" And at that point, I couldn't even talk to him. It was like I was watching myself outside of my body, watching it all play out.
Now, before you continue, just in case anyone missed it, you said you saw them or heard them bringing in the paddles, correct?
Correct.
So if you saw them bringing in the paddles, normally paddles is to revive someone.
Yes.
Okay, so now they're getting ready to revive you, and the only thing that you know in your consciousness, you know what's going on, but you don't really, it's like you're not there, but you're there.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna let you continue because this is getting pretty intense. All right, go ahead.
So they got ready to bring the paddles in, and the nurse said, "Well, we're going to try to work. The doctor wants me to administer some medicine, and we're going to put a non-rebreather mask on." It's actually a mask that covers your nose down all the way to your chin. So they put the mask on, and slowly my heart rate started coming back down. Slowly it started coming back down. So they pushed the paddles back out in the hallway, and I was like, whew. Finally, I can breathe relief at that point. So then I started coming back into reality at that point. And I think I went the whole night, well, half of the night. And my boys left. They went to go be with my father-in-law at the time. And I think I asked to call my mom. I asked one of the nurses to call my mom, and she said, "Well, okay, give me about a minute and I'll call your mom." And so she said, funny thing is I just called your mom, but I don't think she was in her right mind at this point because my mom said thought she was dreaming.
Yeah.
So she called her back again. She said, when I think she's gotten a little bit alert, I'll call her again. So she called my mom again. And so being my mom, she started panicking. So she said, well, just get yourself together and get here as quick as you can. So I think my mom got there probably about 7 in the morning. And so the doctor finally came downstairs. He was in surgery somewhere, and he came and talked to my mom. And so my mom came back in the room, and she just started staring at me. Mm-hmm. And I said, what's wrong? She was like, they can't fix it here. You're going to have to go downtown to the big Piedmont for them to fix it, Piedmont, Atlanta. And I was like, why? She was like, well, this is the second time it happened, and now they're going to have to do a surgery to fix the problem. So they got ready to transport me. A couple of firefighters came, and I actually know them because I was in EMT school. And they were talking to me, and they said, that is the coolest thing that somebody we know had a pneumothorax. Like in school, we heard of a pneumothorax, but I guess we never seen anybody with a pneumothorax.
And if you would explain, what is a pneumothorax? A
pneumothorax is when the lung drops down less than the capacity that it's supposed to be at.
Okay.
So it's basically a lung collapse. So on film, your lung will be extended up here, and then on film, if you had a lung collapse, it'll be preferably down here.
Oh, wow.
So when I got to Piedmont, Atlanta, I met a really nice lady doctor, and she said, I know this may sound kind of weird. She said, did you have your monthly cycle this month? And I said, yes. And she said, did it stay on longer than usual? And I said, yes, it kind of stayed on maybe 8 to 9 days. And she said, I think it may be endometriosis causing these problems. And I said, she's like, have you had heavy cycles before? And I said, previously, before I had my children, I did. But when I had my kids, it got better. But just in the last 2 or 3 months, it started to get back heavy again. So I didn't really think nothing of it. So she was like, we're going to run a couple of tests on you, Ms. Clemens, to kind of find out what the problem is. And we may send you for an MRI. And she went, I think she went to our office. She came back. She said, you came to us a year ago, and there is a gray space there. Did anybody talk to you about this gray space in your body? And I said, no. And she's like, at the time she thought it was cancer. They didn't know what it was. It was sitting on the side of where my liver was. And she said, this problem was going on a year ago. And I told her when I run on the treadmill, I would breathe in deep and it would just instantly pop. I would feel like a popping sensation. And she said, that's very interesting. So she was like, I'm going to send you for an MRI to see what's going on. And at that time, I mean, my fear set in. When I heard the word cancer, it set in. And I started shaking like a leaf. I mean, shaking. And I think at the time I had an African nurse, and she came in and she said, you know, this is not normal for us to do this, but I want to pray with you. She prayed with me for maybe an hour. And I was just still shaking. My body was trembling. Finally, they had to give me, they finally had to sedate me to get me where I was comfortable with doing the MRI. So finally they did the MRI. My parents were there by then. My dad was there at the time. And they sent me for the MRI. And before I can get back upstairs, actually my mom went to go take a break. And my dad was in the room, and my dad said, well, the liver specialist came up to see you, but he'll be back. So the liver specialist came in, and he said, well, we have really good news. The good news is not cancer. but bad news is you're going to have an extensive surgery. And so he started asking my dad, he said, have she ever been in a car accident before? And he said, no, she was in a bus accident years ago with Clark Atlanta University, but that's been over 10 years ago. So he started explaining to him and said she has a hole in her diaphragm. She has a hole in her diaphragm and her liver is poking up through that hole. And that's what's causing the lung collapse.
Okay, so you have a hole in your diaphragm. Mm-hmm. Your liver is poking through the hole. But without knowing all of this, having been told about the gray space, you didn't ask about the gray space, because clearly if someone tells you about the gray space, they should tell you what the gray space is. So if they didn't think it was a big deal, why is it a big deal? And you have this gray space, and now you know that from some type of trauma, that the liver in the hole, in the diaphragm, is causing your lung to collapse.
Yes.
Okay. So then, what's next? I mean,
the next step was to have a surgery to repair the diaphragm and to cause the lung to reinflate back up and to remain where it is. And they were going to look around and see if they seen any evidence of endometriosis. So that's where we were at that point. At that point, I was on a waiting list for the surgery. So they were planning on sending me home with a machine. I can't think of the name of the machine at the time, but it drains all the fluid out of your lungs, and the same tube that I had in my side. And it was going to be a portable one. And I was like, no, you're not sending me home with 2 small kids and a portable machine. What happens if they trip over the machine and the tube actually pulls out? Okay. So that's where we were at that point, waiting on surgery.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up, and then we definitely will have to conclude this later. But I want the audience to understand that, you know, the process of trauma, you know, as it catapults, as it seems to spiral out of control, takes you from one level emotionally to the next level. And so when we come back and continue our conversation later with Kina Hutchins Clements, just take a moment to understand that some of the things that we face that we think are just totally out of control really are not out of control. It's our mind that's out of control. But when things get there, you know, what brings us back to a safe place? What brings us back to a mental state where we can actually get quiet, process, and then be able to move on? So until we come back with Kina Hutchins Clements, I want to say to my Surviving Change guests, my Surviving Change audience rather, that we want to get ourselves to a place where we can totally understand how to deal with change, so that survival is not something that totally eclipses us, because our response is not what it needs to be. So until we come back for another episode, I'm Angela Addison. Thank you once again for joining us on Surviving Change.